So before we continue, today 24th April, we had a beautiful darshan, and I'm sure all of you would have an equally beautiful darshan there. So let me start with the message we received today. It is a pink and white folder with the mother's picture. She is standing on a white lotus, and the message is: remain very quiet, open your mind and your heart to Sri Aurobindo's influence and mine. Withdraw deep into an inner silence, which may be had in all circumstances. Call me from the depths of this silence, and you will see me standing there in the center of your being. The mother. As we know, it is the day of mother's final arrival to Pondicherry, and she has given the significance of this day as the day, the definitive sign of victory over the adverse forces. And today we shall read another kind of arrival, her arrival in the human heart. We read the message that we can find her there in the silence of the heart, in the silent deeps. But before we reach that point, just to recapitulate what we were reading last time, the process of transformation. And in one of her writings, the mother reveals it thus, commenting on this part of Book 1, Canto 3, which we have been reading, where the consciousness moves up. There is an opening above to the light, the power, the peace, the ananda. And then the consciousness comes down, which seems like a fall. But actually this too is a period of work, for he comes unseen into our darker parts, and there, veiled by the light, veiled by the darkness, does his work, a subtle and all-knowing guest and guide, till they too feel the need and will to change. The mother observes, reveals the period of preparation for the transformation of the physical. This nature below that seemed to be unchangeable by the constant downpour of power and light became plastic and capable of transformation. So transformation is not a process done by mental effort, as we find time and again in Sri Aurobindo's writings and the mother's. It is done through an opening to the higher power and the higher grace. And as we open more and more, by quietening the mind through an upward and inward aspiration, through faith, through surrender, the light and the power and the higher consciousness comes down and begins to touch those parts which are hidden under the folds of darkness and change them. And even while it changes them, it respects the law of freedom, or an apparent freedom given to each part. So first we become conscious of these parts, these hidden points of darkness, and then there is a kind of will upon them to change, and slowly these parts themselves begin to will for the change, and then the change comes. So we have this process, and we continue on page 37. Even on the struggling nature left below, I think 10 odd lines from above, page 37. Even on the struggling nature left below, strong periods of illumination came, lightnings of glory after glory burned. Experience was a tale of blaze and fire. Air rippled round the argosies of the gods. Strange riches sailed to him from the unseen. Splendors of insight filled the blank of thought. Knowledge spoke to the inconscient stillnesses. Rivers poured down of bliss and luminous force. Visits of beauty, storm sweeps of delight rained from the all-powerful mystery above. So the whole process is reminiscent of the Vedic effort, and Aurobindo has spoken of it in The Secret of the Vedas. He speaks of the experiences he had with the three goddesses, and there is a whole chapter, in fact 2 chapters, dedicated to this experience in The Secret of the Vedas, where he speaks of the 7 oceans and the rivers pouring down, which the Vedic rishis aspired for, and he goes at great lengths to reveal that these rivers are not just physical rivers, but the inner illumination, the pouring down of riches from God's plenty into the human darkness, into our fallen state. Then stooped the eagles of omniscience. Once the field is made ready, the rivers have come down and cleansed the parts. Then eagles of omniscience begin to visit us. A dense veil was rent, a mighty whisper heard, repeated in the privacy of his soul, a wisdom cry from rapt transcendences sang on the mountains of an unseen world. The voices that an inner listening hears conveyed to him their prophet utterances, and flame-wrapped outbursts of the immortal word and flashes of an occult revealing light approached him from the unreachable secrecy. An inspired knowledge sat enthroned within, whose seconds illumined more than reason's years. So this higher knowledge may clothe itself in logic, but it is not a logical knowledge. It's not attained through the process of logical thought or a laboring intelligence through links of reason. It is a knowledge that comes ready and complete in itself from above, and in one moment it can reveal what one may not be able to arrive through a detailed and prolonged and painstaking analysis of all the facts that one may have at one's disposal. An ictus of revealing luster fell, as if a pointing accent upon truth, and like a sky flare showing all the ground, a swift intuitive discernment shone. One glance could separate the true and false, or raise its rapid torch fire in the dark, to check the claimants crowding through mind's gates, covered by the forged signatures of the gods, detect the magic bride in her disguise, or scan the apparent face of thought and life. So here our being is described as a citadel or a fortress into which many kinds of thoughts and suggestions and feelings and impulses and impulsions claim entry. And one of the first effects that spontaneously happens when one is in contact with the higher truth is that one is able to detect the lie, one is able to distinguish what is true and what is false, not through a process of again analysis and reason, but as the result of a direct seeing. The mother reveals this power of detecting falsehood wherever it wants to come in and veil the truth. This power becomes more and more evident with the development of the inner consciousness. And there arrives a moment when it is quite natural and spontaneous to see what is true and to detect what is false. This power brings with it the peace of the certitude, and the power of transformation. So this is the essential difference between all higher movements and the lower movements that can masquerade and try to pass off as a higher inspiration. The higher inspiration always carries with it peace and a certitude which is full of calm and a joy, and with it comes the power of the authentic change. Whereas movement that masquerade it are always full of a restless anguish and an agony and agitation. So this is one of the first effects that Ashapati undergoes, a first change. He has made contact with the still self of the Supreme. Now he is in contact with the dynamic power of transformation that begins to work in him. The path, as we have noted, of the Vedic rishis. And now the new movement starts. This movement is about the progressive descent of the illumination, the light, the power of revelation, the revelatory knowledge, the intuitive knowledge, the knowledge that awakens and enters through inspiration, its nature, its quality, even its content. We find here oft inspiration with her lightning feet. So it is not labored knowledge. When the mind is quiet, inspiration, the goddess of inspiration, carrying with it the knowledge of the higher worlds, and later, as we shall see, even of the lower worlds, enters into the human heart. A sudden messenger from the all-seeing tops traverse these soundless corridors of his mind. The more the mind becomes quiet, the more we are able to receive this inspiration from above, bringing her rhythmic sense of hidden things. A music spoke, transcending mortal speech, as if from a golden phial of the all bliss, a joy of light, a joy of sudden sight, a rapture of the thrilled undying word, poured into his heart as into an empty cup, a repetition of God's first delight, creating in a young and virgin time. This higher knowledge always carries with it bliss and beatitude and truth and spirit and a power of change, the five sons of the higher spiritual poetry. It is rhythmic, so to say, and it comes the more our consciousness becomes empty and upturned, because if it just empties itself but is not upturned in an aspiration to the beyond, then in this emptiness all kinds of cosmic forces can enter and occupy the place. So there is a double movement, a movement to quieten the mind and a movement of aspiration above to bring down the grace. There is a nice little small story where a professor goes to a master to ask for knowledge, seeking for knowledge. And the master asks him to sit down and have a cup of tea. So he calls one of his disciples and asks him to pour the tea. The disciple pours and pours, and he doesn't stop because he has not been asked to stop. And the cup spills, or the tea spills over the cup and over the saucer and onto the tablecloth and onto the professor's shirt. And then the professor remarks, almost aghast, "Sir, but the cup is full." So the master says, "Just like you must empty the cup before you can have the knowledge." So before we can have this inspiration, this true knowledge, there is a great amount of self-culture that goes in. And it is this that prepares for this greater word. Aurobindo reveals in The Secret of the Vedas, the rishi who employed these faculties, referring to the faculties of inspiration, intuition and revelation, had acquired them by a progressive self-culture. Knowledge itself was a traveling and a reaching, or a finding and a winning. The revelation came only at the end. The light was the prize of a final victory. There is continually in the Veda this image of the journey, the soul's march on the path of truth. As it advances, new vistas of power and light opens to its aspiration. It wins by a heroic effort its enlarged spiritual possession. So this is the plenitude that the Vedic rishis aspired for. The cows and the horses, the light and the force of a divine consciousness. In a brief moment caught, a little space, all knowledge packed into great wordless thoughts. It's very interesting that we normally look at things, sensations, awaken thoughts in us. But when we withdraw our mind from this world of sensations, which is one of the ways to quieten the mind as per the recommendation of the Gita, the mind is withdrawn from the senses as a tortoise withdraws its feet into the shell. This is the description. And as the thought activity, the mind activity is withdrawn from the senses, we have a similar description later in Savitri, in moments when the inner lamps are lit and life's cherished guests are left outside. Our spirit sits alone and speaks to its gulfs. So as the mind withdraws from the sensational activity, as it withdraws from its vital fantasies, its desires and common thought preoccupations linked to the senses and the desire mind, as it withdraws and aspires and opens above, a quietude begins to spread upon the members, and large chunks of knowledge packed in a single moment are revealed as in a flash. Sometimes this revelation can come as a single word, on which pages after pages could be revealed in terms of thought and words. So here that description we see, all knowledge packed into great wordless thoughts. Beyond the thought there is the idea, and beyond the idea there is the seer's sight, lost in the expectant stillness of his depths. A crystal of the ultimate absolute, a portion of the inexpressible truth, revealed by silence to the silent soul. The intense creatrix in his stillness wrought, her power fallen speechless, grew more intimate. This is a beautiful line, very powerful expression, that this power, this knowledge that pours in, is not simply the knowledge of word and sound and thought. In fact, if we can learn how to still the thought, this knowledge becomes even more powerful and intimate. She looked upon the seen and the unforeseen. So it is not only a knowledge of the occult depths, but also a knowledge of the unexpected, of what is going to come. Unguessed domains she made her native field. This is referring to the inner conquest of the seer. And then once again we have a little bit of this process described. All vision gathered into a single ray, as when the eyes stare at an invisible point, till through the intensity of one luminous spot, an apocalypse of a world of images enters into the kingdom of the seer. So the more the mind becomes still, the more it becomes one-pointed in its concentration, the more it becomes white and plastic and pure, the more the goddess and the powers that she brings begins to pour the heavenly riches into the kingdom of her being. A great nude arm of splendor suddenly rose. It rent the gauze opaque of nescience. Her lifted finger's keen, unthinkable tip bared with a stab of flame the closed beyond. An eye awake in voiceless heights of trance. A mind plucking at the unimaginable, overleaping with the soul and perilous bound. The high black wall hiding superconscience. This black wall is the wall of ignorance, and the superconscient is hid from our sight, even as our own depths, even as the depths below, the inconscient and the denizens of the dark deeps and the luminous guests of the beyond, they are hidden from our sight. But this inspiration, this knowledge is like a stab of flame which cuts gaps into this vault and opens more and more the knowledge of the beyond, the truths of the beyond. She broke in with inspired speech for scythe and plundered the unknowable's vast estate. A glimmer of infinitesimal grains of truth, a sheaf binder of infinite experience. She pierced the guarded mysteries of world force, and her magic methods wrapped in 1,000 veils. So this knowledge is not only about knowledge of the divine or the one, but also his ways with the world. It shows to us the many moods of the unknown. It reveals the methods of the one consciousness with the multiplicity. It shows us the ways and patterns and movements of the world force and the lines of forces, the great lines which determine the world's fate and ours. And all this it gathers as if in a single sweep. So it is not laboring to link one to another, but the entire links are shown, revealed, as if in a single vision. So we have these lines, two lines, a glimmer of infinitesimal grains of truth. But these grains of truth are not just seen as separate points, but there is also this second suggestion, a sheaf binder of infinite experience. So all these many points are seen together as if in a single vast chain held together. Or she gathered the lost secrets dropped by time in the dust and crannies of his mounting route, mid old forsaken dreams of hastening mind and buried remnants of forgotten space. So not only does it reveal the truths of the future, the unforeseen, but also the lost truths of the past and things which have yet to be discovered, which the hurried travelers to the truth in the past forgot to pick up, and things that they have dropped into our mud, into our earth nature, which have been lost and covered through the dust of centuries. We see Sri Aurobindo's work on secret of the Vedas, the Upanishads and the Gita is a work of that kind, where he picks up these old secrets, lost secrets dropped by time. And the method he uses is just the method which the Vedic rishis undertook. Not through analysis these truths could be known, but only through a growing inner experience. A traveller between summit and abyss, she joined the distant ends, the viewless deeps, or streaked along the roads of heaven and hell, pursuing all knowledge like a questing hound. So this knowledge again is not just a knowledge of beautiful and bright things. It also shows us the truth that is concealed within a whole body of falsehood. It also shows us the light which is hidden in the dark passages of hell. So this is a knowledge which is more like a circular knowledge, like a torch beam which illumines in the front, which illumines what is above and illumines what is below in the arc of its possibilities. So this is the nature of this knowledge. A reporter and scribe of hidden wisdom talk, her shining minutes of celestial speech passed through the massed office of the occult mind, transmitting gave to prophet and to seer the inspired body of the mystic truth, a recorder of the inquiry of the gods. So what the gods speak between themselves, that is reported to us in the language that we can understand. There is a little humorous aside to this line, in the sense it reminds me of a small little dialogue between Amrita and I forget the other person with whom he shared this little joke. As we know, Amrita was a bhakta to the core and full of wit and humor. So once there was a discussion and someone said to him that, Amrita, and he was a Tamil by birth, so someone told him, Amrita, Sanskrit is Deva Bhasha, it is the language of the gods. So he said, no, you are slightly mistaken there, it's a partial truth. And Amrita had this to comment. He said, when the gods speak to humans, they speak in Sanskrit, but when they speak among themselves, they speak in Tamil. So this was Amrita's ways of so here we have this line that what transpires between the gods, man does not know. The gods are planning the events of the future. We have something very interesting. We have this kind of a thing, the gods speaking among themselves and deciding the fate of earth and mankind in Homer's Iliad, where even before the war has begun, Zeus and the gods on the Olympian peaks have decided the fate of the whole nation, of the whole tribe and clan. So, but if we have this goddess by our side, she reports to us the inquiry of the gods. She brought immortal words to mortal men. Above the reason's brilliant, slender curve, released like radiant air dimming a moon, broad spaces of a vision without line or limit swam into his spirit skin. So reason, though brilliant it seems, is a little curve beyond which there are large sun steppies of knowledge, as he would reveal to us, and moon belts of delight. So it went beyond that bar and brought inspired speech. It brought the body of truth into earth's skin. Broad spaces of a vision without line or limit swam into his spirit skin. Oceans of being met his voyaging soul, calling to infinite discovery, timeless domains of joy and absolute power, stressed out, surrounded by the eternal hush, the ways that lead to endless happiness. So again and again it's emphasized that this knowledge, this truth is not a dry, cold abstraction of the intellect, but a knowledge that is instinct with joy, a knowledge that is instinct with a subtle bliss, not the crude joy, but something very subtle, refined. And this knowledge is also instinct with a power that can change. And that incidentally is, we can see the nature of Aurobindo's writings. Even if the logical mind and the limited mind is unable to understand it, it doesn't really matter. As long as we can feel happy, as long as we feel a little joy invade our heart, silently, quietly, a subtle delight, that means the power of the words are being released into us, and the change is taking place unknown to us. So this knowledge brings with it power and the delight that is native to a higher state of consciousness. The ways that lead to endless happiness ran like dream smiles through meditating vast. Disclosed stood up in a gold moment's blaze, white sun steppies in the pathless infinite. along a naked curve in boneless self, the points that run through the closed heart of things shadowed the indeterminable line that carries the everlasting through the years. Now, this knowledge is revealing or reconciling all the paradoxes, how the formless has built this world of forms, how the nameless has assumed many names, and how the one plays with his own infinity. This is being revealed to us through these lines, and this power, this knowledge of the higher worlds, of the higher hemisphere, of a higher consciousness, brings this to us from the boneless self. This is hidden in the heart of the self, and it brings that unmanifest, that indeterminate truth into the domain of our understanding through a process of revelation and illumination. The magician order of the cosmic mind, coercing the freedom of infinity with the stark array of nature's symbol facts and life's incessant signals of event, transmuted chance recurrences into laws, a chaos of science into a universe. Out of the rich wonders and the intricate worlds of the spirit's dance with matter as its mask, the balance of the world's design grew clear. So we do not understand the world if we take this stand only in the lower hemisphere and the divided consciousness. We see forms of matter, forms of thoughts, forms of life patterns, and we do not understand how they have come into being. We do not understand their true relation with the whole and even between themselves. Equally, we do not understand this world if we enter into the heart of the unknown and annul ourselves. But there is something or someone who can mediate between this silence of the Supreme and this ever-changing world. So here we have these beautiful lines. Its logic of infinite intelligence, its magic of a changing eternity. So all this begins to grow clear. Its symmetry of self-arranged effects, managed in the deep perspectives of the soul, and the realism of its elusive art, its logic of infinite intelligence, its magic of a changing eternity. A glimpse was caught of things forever unknown. The letters stood out of the unmoving word. In the immutable, nameless origin was seen emerging as from fathomless seas the trail of the ideas that made the world, and sown in the black earth of nature's trance. So this world is built by the divine idea which has sown itself as a seed in this darkness of nescience. And from there, step by step, it is emerging. Aurobindo has described this whole process of involution and evolution. This idea of involution is there in the Vedas, and we have this image in the Upanishad, the Katha Upanishad particularly, and the Gita, of the Ashwath tree. The cosmic tree has its roots above and branches below. So this cosmos has emerged from above. It is a real idea that made possible this world of changing names and forms. And this real idea has gone and buried itself like a little seed into the heart of space and time. And from there it is emerging through a process of evolution. This too is spoken of in the Vedas, but the stress is primarily on the evolution of the soul. There is also a thought about evolution of forms, but Aurobindo takes it to its fullest possible significance, and we have that truth here revealed in such beautiful lines. And sown in the black earth of nature's trance, the seed of the spirit's blind and huge desire, from which the tree of cosmos was conceived. So this cosmos has come out. It is said of a desire in the spirit, but the spirit, what could it desire but to manifest and express itself, its infinity in terms of space and time, and spread its magic arms through a dream of space. Immense realities took on a shape. There looked out from the shadow of the unknown the bodiless namelessness that saw God born. This bodiless namelessness is of course referring to Parabrahman, out of whom the being of Sachidanand is shadowed forth as the Paratpar Purush. So this knowledge can lead us to those regions where thought and reason fail and tries to gain from the mortal's mind and soul a deathless body and a divine name. So here Aurobindo is revealing in just few lines the secret of this cosmos, the cosmos and its magic, the emergence of form out of a formless, bodiless energy, the emergence of name and properties and qualities out of something of which we cannot define by any name or quality, because they are all limitations imposed upon its infinity. Its purpose is precisely to mate the finite with the infinite and the mortal with the immortal, to assume a name and form for that which is beyond names and forms, and tries to gain from the world, from the mortal's mind and soul, a deathless body and a divine name, not a death-bound body, not a name which is imperfect, incomplete, but the whole effort of creation is so that matter and material consciousness, the present consciousness which is death-bound, can assume a deathless form, a deathless body, and a name divine. The immobile lips, the great surreal wings, the visage masked by superconscious sleep, the eyes with their closed lids that see all things, appeared of the architect who builds in trance. So we have this image of Vishnu spread out on the ocean of milk, his eyes closed and sleeping on the infinite coils of time, the Anant Nag, and out of his navel there emerges the lotus on whom Brahma is born, and he has the word of creation, and the Veda or the word of creation emerges out of his mouth in all the four directions, which is symbol of space being born, the directions being born, and then creation emerging out of it. So we have this line, this image here in a very few lines. The visage masked by superconscient sleep. It is the sleep of the superconscient. The eyes with their closed lids that see all things, appeared of the architect who builds in trance. The original desire born in the void peered out. He saw the hope that never sleeps. We can end with few more lines and then a small letter of Aurobindo. Not a letter, but a passage from the Secret of the Vedas. Just a few lines below. The radiant world of the everlasting truth, as if a torch held by a power of God, the radiant world of the everlasting truth glimmered like a faint star bordering the night, above the golden overminds shimmering ridge, even where caught as through a cunning veil the smile of love that sanctions the long game. These are beautiful lines. where the knowledge, this higher consciousness, goes right up to the overmind, from where we can glimpse, as if through a cunning veil, the love that has sanctioned this dangerous, difficult game. As Aurobindo would put it, this world was built by cruelty so that love may dwell there. It was built by death so that immortal life and eternal life may find room for itself. The calm indulgence and maternal breasts of wisdom suckling the child laughter of chance. So when we look at this world from this side, all appears a play of chance and accident. But along with chance or a seeming chance, always there runs behind a wisdom, a deep wisdom. And chance is only a daughter and handmaid of wisdom. Chance is used by wisdom for a deeper purpose. So this intuition reveals to us of the wisdom behind the casual steps of chance. Silence the nurse of the Almighty's power, the omniscient hush, womb of the immortal word, and of the timeless, the still brooding face, and the creative eye of eternity. And now we have this great coming and settling down. We read the message today that the Mother is deep inside our heart. And if we quieten ourselves and go within in the silence, we can find her there. So we have a similar experience, but in another domain, in another dimension of one of our powers. The inspiring goddess entered a mortal's breast, made there her study of divining thought and sanctuary of prophetic speech, and sat upon the tripod seat of mind. This tripod seat is the triple stair of the lower mind. The triple stair, the mind, the physical mind, which depends heavily on the data of the senses, the vital mind, which flies on imagination wings, and the rational mind, which tries to balance between fact and fiction, between sensory reality and imagination. So this is the tripod seat, and this goddess came and sat over it. It became a footstool, as it were, for the goddess. And the human heart and the human tongue became a house of prophetic speech. All was made wide above, all lit below. In darkness core she dug the wells of light. On the undiscovered depths imposed a form, lent a vibrant cry to the unuttered vasts, and through great shoreless, voiceless, starless breaths bore earthward fragments of revealing thought, hewn from the silence of the ineffable. A voice in the heart uttered the unspoken name. A passage from Aurobindo. This passage is from The Secret of the Vedas again, when Aurobindo speaks of the inspired speech. The Rishi was not the individual composer of the hymn, but the seer, the drishta of an eternal truth and an impersonal knowledge. The language of the Veda itself is Shruti, a rhythm not composed by the intellect, but heard, a divine word that came vibrating out of the infinite to the inner audience of the man who had previously made himself fit for the impersonal knowledge. And we have just read how one makes oneself fit through quietude, through turning the mind inward and upward what the Gita calls as Vyavasayitmak Buddhi, the many branching intellect which is always turned outward and downward, has to become ingathered and in an aspiration open to the above and to its own depth. Then this process takes place and an impersonal knowledge, a wide God knowledge and world knowledge begins to pour itself and enters the kingdom of the seer, who had previously made himself fit for the impersonal knowledge. The wisest depended on the intuitive mind for all knowledge that ranged beyond mankind's ordinary perceptions. It's very interesting in the ancient lore when we read about how Ayurveda developed. So it's almost as a stark contrast to the way modern medicine developed through a reductionist approach, through the laboring mind, analytical and intellectual mind trying to pick up surface facts, analyzing statistical data, and going through error and truth, and still we know that as it advances it begins to turn back upon itself with doubt. But there is another way of knowledge and which the ancient rishis used, and it's amazing that how Ayurveda has survived thousands of years, and modern medicine just in a few hundred years has begun to review its own future, which seems to be at a kind of stake despite all the marvelous surgery. So the story goes that how Ayurveda came into existence. The seers sat upon the mountains and they saw so much suffering in the world, suffering which was hampering man's natural enjoyment and his pursuing of the rightful aims, the path of dharma in life. The age had been shortened and death and accident through natural and unnatural causes were becoming more frequent and easy. So the rishis, they prayed, and as they prayed, Indra appeared to them in a form which had 1,000 eyes all over the body, which looked all around, and he gave them the knowledge of the herbs which will help man to achieve longevity and vigor and health, to pursue the path of dharma and to enjoy a happy and healthy life. So this is very interesting because even the material knowledge, there was hardly any statistical approach, at least not that we know of, but the knowledge has survived, and to this day it is not only being used but is also being revived, almost threatening to come back, though of course we are still trying to receive this knowledge through the analytical mind, and therefore it's not working to its utmost because this is an intuitive knowledge, and to handle it there is the need of a refined and a subtle intellect and an intuitive mind. This belongs to the domain of what was called in India as intuitive sciences. They cannot be approached analytically. They can be, but they lose their full power and benefits. So this is the way this knowledge was received by the rishis, and Aurobindo is revealing to us the wisest depended on the intuitive mind for all knowledge that ranged beyond mankind's ordinary perceptions. This is not to say that the ordinary knowledge was not helpful, but it could fit in. It could fit in some missing links, but it was not the main body. Their aim was illumination, not logical conviction. Their ideal, the inspired seer, not the accurate reasoner. So this is the kind of knowledge that begins to pour in as we grow in consciousness, as our heights open up, and as the outpourings of the light and the flame touch our depths and awaken consciousness even in earth stuff. So we'll pause here with these last few lines. In darkness core, she dug out wells of light. All was made wide above, all lit below. In darkness core, she dug out wells of light. On the undiscovered depths imposed a form, lent a vibrant cry to the unuttered vast. and through great shoreless, voiceless, starless breaths, bore earthward fragments of revealing thought, hewn from the silence of the ineffable. A voice in the heart uttered the unspoken name. I think we can pause here.